The last recording, we left off with talking about the nerve plexuses. So now I want to focus on certain nerves that, one, you have to be able to tell me the particular nerve plexus each of these major nerves are supplied by. So we're going to fill this in first. And then you'll have to tell me kind of what some of the functions of these nerves. So phrenic nerve is supplied by the cervical plexus. The median and radial nerves are from the brachial. Genitofemoral and femoral nerve are from the lumbar. And sciatic and pudendal are sacral plexus. So let's start with the phrenic nerve. So phrenic nerve, or I should say, let's just start with, just mention all these nerves are mixed again. So they have sensory and motor functions. In your notes, I've only focused on a motor function for the phrenic nerve, which is it supplies innervation to the diaphragm, which you see right here. And so it's definitely needed for inhalation. The diaphragm is a skeletal muscle. It has to be told to contract. So if the phrenic nerves are not working, you're not going to be able to breathe. But it does have sensory. It does have sensory in regards to like touch and pain from things like the diaphragm, as well as the pericardium, which is around the heart. But we're just going to focus on the motor function for the phrenic nerve. The median nerve, which has fibers supplied by the brachial plexus, has sensory and motor, and we're going to focus on both of them. So the median nerve supplies cutaneous innervation to what you see, the structures or the parts of the skin that you see in red. So if I'm touching certain things in that part of my hand, the median nerve is actually carrying that information to the central nervous system. So in your notes, you'll see that it carries information, say, from the skin of the palmar surface of your thumb, which you see right here, your thumb, index, middle, and half your ring finger, the dorsal surface of the middle and distal phalanges of your index, middle, and half your ring finger. So you kind of see it in red. The motor functions is, before we kind of do motor functions, I want to kind of define something for you because you're going to see these terms, is flexion and extension. So extension is where you bend a body part to decrease the angle between two body parts. A extension is the straightening of a joint to increase the angle between two body parts. So the median nerve is involved or innervates muscles that allow us to flex the wrist. So wrist flexion. So wrist flexion is, you'll notice, is where the palm of your hand is moving towards the direction of the inside of your forearm. Okay, so that would be wrist flexion. And just kind of do it, you're going to see the angle is decreasing between in that joint. It's also involved in something called pronation of the hand. That's a rotational movement of your forearm, which turns your palm of your hand downwards or posteriorly. So remember, when you're in anatomical position, your palms are facing forward. That's a supinated position. If you turn those palms back, your hands would be pronated. So, but it's involved in pronation. Another thing it's involved is, you have it written here as radial deviation. The other term for what you have is abduction, AB with a B, duction of the wrist. Abduction is a movement of a body part away from the body's midline. So this is a left hand. So they call it radial deviation too, because right here is the radius. So you're kind of bending that wrist towards the direction of where the radius is. Ulnar, this is the ulna right here. And so this is why this is ulnar deviation if you move it in that direction, because you move it to the ulna. And in this case, this would have been adduction of the wrist. but median nerve is involved in abduction of the wrist. Other thing it's involved in is flexion of the thumb and opposition. So with flexion of the thumb is going to be curling inwards towards the palm. So, and it's parallel to the plane of the palm. If I was moving it out this way, that would be extension, but this is flexion of the thumb. Opposition of the thumb is, and this is not the only thing that could represent opposition of the thumb, because opposition is where you move the thumb pad to touch the pad of another digit on the same hand. So I can touch the pad of my pinky, my ring finger, my middle finger, my index finger. That's opposition. Other thing, I couldn't find a picture that really showed it, just the two fingers that it's involved in flexing. It's also involved in flexion of the index and middle fingers, just those two. So keeping that in mind, if you had a subject that had damage to the median nerve and you asked them to make a fist, they would have problems flexing the index finger, the middle finger, and the thumb. This is what would happen, is you would observe what they refer to as the benediction sign, named kind of based on like when the Pope is blessing you, the kind of the hand that they use when they're blessing you. The radial nerve also has innervation from the brachial plexus. It is a mixed nerve, and so cutaneous innervation you see is depicted and colored in blue. So with that one, you notice it's from the skin from the dorsal surface, the dorsal and lateral surface of the palm, dorsal surface of the thumb, dorsal surface of the index, middle, and half the ring finger. And you have those written out for you in your notes. I just like the pictures because it's easier to see. Now, motor function. While the median did a lot of controlling muscles involved in flexion, this one does a lot of things involved in extension. So remember, extension is straightening of a joint to increase the angle between two body parts. And what you see here, it's extension of the elbow, because it innervates a muscle called the triceps brachii. So we come here, move it up there, that's elbow extension. It also controls muscles with extension of the wrist. So in this case, that the back of your hand is moving towards the back part of your arm. So that's wrist extension. Extension of the thumb here. Also extending the fingers. So again, keeping that in mind, this, if the person has damage to the radial nerve, and we ask them to put their hands out, put their arms out in front of you, keep your hands kind of parallel for your arms, and they had a problem, is they'd have wrist drop. Instead of keeping this out here, they can't extend the wrist, they get wrist drop, okay? All right, let's go to the next one. We have genitofemoral nerve. This has innervation from the lumbar plexus. Is this one of the things? It has two branches, the genital branch, which is mixed, and the femoral branch, which is just has sensory. And I'm going to show you first the cutaneous innervation. So it does apply cutaneous innervation to the anteromedial surface of your thigh, which you see kind of in that dark pink right here, and portions of your external genitalia. And so you see that is on here, you can kind of see it in kind of that light blue right in here. So you can see parts of the scrotum right here. So just parts of the external genitalia. In males, you would see it in parts of the scrotum. In the female, it's the mons pubis right here, mons pubis, and this got moved, but it's labia majora. Okay, so that was part of the external genitalia in the female. It's responsible for a certain reflex, something called the cremasteric reflex, and you have to have a sensory stimulus, and then you'll see a motor response. Well, if someone, I'm going to come back here, we'll say strokes the inside of a male's thigh, right in here. That sensory information is going to be brought to the spinal cord, and then the motor branch of that nerve is going to control this particular muscle, the cremaster muscle. The cremaster muscles are skeletal muscles that are around the testes in the male. What will happen is if you stroke the inside of the thigh, and we'll say it was the right thigh, you'll see contraction of that muscle, and what will be observed is the testis will move closer to the body. So here, they say stroke it here, that would move up. It's very, I've observed it. It's kind of cool to see it. This is often something they will do in clinical setting to check it. If they think there is testicular torsion, so the spermatic cord is twisted up, they need to fix that very quickly because otherwise you cut off blood supply to the testes and they're going to lose a testis. But that reflex would be impaired because that nerve is carried along that spermatic cord in there. Now, the other nerve from the lumbar plexus that we're going to look at is femoral nerve. Okay, so the femoral nerve is going to innervate a lot of muscles that we're going to be looking at later in the semester. But let's just focus first on the sensory components of it. So it supplies cutaneous innervation for the anteromedial surface of the thigh, where you see kind of that's shown in green, in the medial surface of your leg and the foot. So you see kind of it's all in the green that you see there, okay? Motor functions. So it is needed to innervate the muscles of the anterior thigh, which are involved in extension of the thigh. So here, what you're seeing up here, this is extension. I didn't mean to say that. Extension of the knee, it's knee extension. So you see here, that's knee extension. It does supply innervation to hip adductors and flexors. So it's involved in hip flexion. So you see here, the leg is straight, you're flexing at the hip, so hip flexion. But also adduction of the hip, which is depicted here. So abduction, we had said moving a body part away from the midline. Adduction is movement of a body part toward the midline. Okay, so it's adduction of the hip. So hip adduction. So that's femoral nerve. Now the last one, the last two that we're going to look at has innervation from the sacral plexus. So we're going to be looking at sciatic nerve first, and then we'll look at the pudendal nerve. So you see kind of sciatic nerve written right there. All right. So sciatic nerve is the largest nerve in the body. It's huge. It runs down the back of your thigh. You see it right here. It is sensory. Let's look at sensory first. So all these are, you see it's in different colors because it does branch and supply other nerves. But if you damage the sciatic nerve up in that, where we see where it originated from, you're not going to be able to feel in these areas that you see are colored, right in here. So it supplies cutaneous innervation to the foot, entire lower leg except that medial side, because that medial side was the femoral nerve. Motor function is it's involved in knee flexion. So you see this, what you're seeing here is knee flexion. So notice with the lower limbs, when you're doing flexion, you're moving kind of posteriorly. When you're doing flexion of an upper limb, you're moving more anteriorly. So this, what you see is knee flexion. It also is involved in extension of the hip. So the extension of the hip is kind of moving it back this way. And medial rotation at the hip. So you're going to, and I'll show you these personally in lab so you can see it. So you're rotating the hip towards kind of internally. So it's internal rotation or medial rotation of the hip. It also innervates muscles in a lot of the muscles in the leg and the foot. So a lot of movements on the foot. So you see plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. So plantar flexion is when you point, say, the toes down. Dorsiflexion is where that top of the foot approaches the shin. So that's dorsiflexion. I'm just a little heads up. This part of your foot is considered the dorsum of your foot. So that's dorsiflexion. This is plantar flexion there. So like a ballerina doing dancing on point, they have the plantar flex. Inversion is when you turn the sole medially, and eversion is when you turn the sole of your foot laterally. Okay, so that's sciatic nerve. The pudendal nerve is our last nerve. Comes from a word to be ashamed of. People don't like to talk about the stuff that the pudendal nerve's involved in. So sensory, it's skin of external genitalia. So you see kind of parts right up in here. Let me see if I have another one. Oh, here in the male, it's kind of the base part of the scrotum there, just that part there, and also your penis for the male. Motor function. Let's do motor function. It does innervate muscles of the perineum. In the perineum, I have to come back here so I can make sure you know what the perineum is. Perineum is the region in the female between the vagina and the anus. In the male, it's that region between the base of the penis and the anus. So that's the perineum. Some women have had to have this cut during childbirth or got ripped during childbirth. It also innervates the external anal sphincter, which you see here, which is a skeletal muscle, which is involved in defecation, and the external urethral sphincter. They're showing you here this is the male, this is the female, which is involved in urination. People, again, why do they call it pudendal? Because people don't like talking about this stuff, about pooping and peeing and genitalia. So that's where kind of the name came from. So that is it for the nerves that you need to know. I will show you in lab these nerves on various models. But you will be required, you still need to know what these nerves do, because I could either show you a picture that's depicting an action, and you'll be able to tell me what nerve is responsible for the control of that action, or I could point to the nerve on the model and ask you to tell me a specific function, like motor function of that nerve, and you should be able to do that for me.